So it's sort of funny, if you follow Curated and you sort of understand the different cars we represent and sort of what we promote marketing wise, we actually sometimes get made fun of by sort of enthusiasts, maybe some collectors, because we're always talking about collector quality, concours quality, keywords, talking about low mileage, and we're very specific in what we buy. If people destroy us sometimes. We'll post a car with 500 miles and they'll say, oh, why didn't anyone ever drive that car? No one enjoyed it. And it's funny because if you take me back in time, 10 years ago, I actually felt the same. And until I had a few bad experiences myself, and until really I saw the value of a benchmark car, which you could call a benchmark car, a car that has low miles, it's been treated properly, it's been maintained the right way. And I thought it was a good time to share a personal story, an incredible lesson that I learned when buying my dream car. And this is going back probably almost 7 years ago now. So growing up, I'll never forget, you could call it 1998, 1999. There was a well-known collector by the name of Richard Garber outside of Atlanta. And Richard had an F50 GT, one of three. He had a Diablo SV I that was all modified, a black tan car. He had an F50. He had some really incredible cars. And one of the cars he had was a black Diablo SV. And I'll never forget this car to this day, because when I saw it for the first time, it was at Moroso Motorsports Park, and he was actually tracking the cars. And I saw it, and it just it hit me. I fell in love with the car. At the time, it was probably brand new. It had like 500 miles. And at that moment, it became, I had to have one. It was a dream car of mine. I wanted a black Diablo SV. So fast forward, this is about 6 years ago now, maybe 7 years ago, I completed, and this is in the infancy of Curated, I completed one of my first big car deals. And at the time we had an exotic car rental company, which was doing okay. We had good years, we had bad years, and Curated started out as one deal here, one deal there. And we had just sold, and we'll probably talk about this in a later YouTube video, but the last Ferrari Enzo ever produced. So it wasn't the famous Pope car, number 400. This was the last production car, so 399 of 399. And we had sold it to a massive collector in Georgia, and we had done well on the car. So I had made, we had actually owned it for almost 2 years. We imported the car, and it was this crazy scenario, but we had done pretty well, and I had a nice little profit at the time. So my immediate reaction was to buy my dream car, a black Diablo SV. Sort of ironic, literally, like the week the car was paid for and everything, there was a Barrett-Jackson auction, and they were running a black Diablo SV. I got excited because at the time it was, it had a bad CarFax. It had, I think, 16 or 17,000 miles. So everyone was saying, wow, it's gonna be a great deal. So I was hoping to buy the car around 100,000 or 110,000. And at the time, I would say the best Diablo SV was 200,000, and maybe 185,000. I was looking to save some money. So I'll never forget, I couldn't make it to the auction, but I had a friend there, and I was on the phone with him, and he was bidding, and blah, 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 and he ended up, I think he bought the car for like 125 plus fees. There was another guy involved, there was like some broker involved, and my friend actually was thinking about keeping the car. And I'm like, wait a minute, I really want the car. So I even ended up paying him a profit. So I think I probably bought the car, ended up being 140,000, which was still cheap for a Diablo SV. And I was so excited, I'll never forget. I think one of the first calls I made, I called my dad and I said, I just bought this Diablo SV. And he's like, wow, what a great deal. And I'm like, yeah, it needs a few things. I know it needs some work. It's got a bad CarFax. And he's like, you idiot. He's like, you shouldn't be buying a car with a bad CarFax. You're gonna have to sink money into it. And I was so optimistic and I was so excited that I could buy this car to drive. I wouldn't worry about it too much. So fast forward, I get my financing approved at the time. I'm all excited. I get the bank ready. I pay for the car, and the car gets loaded onto a truck. Now, at the time, I was just in the infancy days at Curated. I probably didn't manage my money so well. So this was essentially my entire life savings going into this car that was now being shipped from California to Miami. I was actually trying to save money on shipping, so I used the cheapest imaginable enclosed carrier you could use. The car disappeared for about 2 weeks. I couldn't reach the carrier. I was terrified of what happened to the car, and I think this would have been like in March or February. I think February of January, because I remember vividly the car arriving to Miami. Finally, it arrived. I was really upset with the trucker, and even have a photo of the day the car arrived to Miami, and I see it coming off the truck, and I'm just staring at this car, and I don't know what happened to the enclosed truck during this period, but the car was covered in dust. It almost looked like gray or metallic black. It didn't even look black. And he pulls it off, and I'm so excited. I just signed the trucking invoice, and I jump in the car, and I go to drive it. And the car sounded incredible. You could tell it was, the engine sounded great. It had a sport exhaust on it, and it was just rumbling, and I was so excited. So I get in, I put it in first gear, and I slowly pull away. And then I immediately, after it warms up a little bit, I go to punch it. And the revolutions, the RPM gauge just flies up. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, the clutch is burnt. So I didn't even check if it was something that the trucker did. I'm assuming it was. A Diablo's a very tough car to load on a truck like that. So already I get sort of punched in the gut. I realize I just bought this Diablo. I probably have no more money left, and the clutch is blown. Regardless, I'm super excited. I'm like, okay, so I pull over. I think I washed it down at our office that time. I quickly wiped it down, and the car aesthetically looked good. You could see where the car was hit. I think on the driver's side, there was some paint work, but overall the car actually, it looked incredible. So I was still excited. It sounded great. At that moment, everything was working. That was at that moment. So I decided, I was born and raised in Palm Beach area, and that was that weekend was actually the big equestrian festival in Wellington. So I had this great idea of driving the car from Miami to Palm Beach. I was gonna go hang out with my old friends, and I was gonna have my dream car that weekend in Wellington, and I was gonna go see my dad. And I was really, it was like a big, sort of a big journey for me. So I go home, take a shower, and I get ready. And it's probably like 5:30 in the afternoon, so it's probably the sun setting, and I'm ready to go on my first major drive with this Diablo. And I in my head, I'm like, oh, I can adjust the clutch. It's not gonna be the end of the world. I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm like, oh, this is not so bad. So I get in the car, and I get on the highway, and I start driving. And automatically it loses basically 50% of the power the car has. The car starts surging. So it's like this, absolutely terrible. The check engine lights are coming on. All the lights are coming on in the dash, and then the car regains power again. Now, when it does regain power, the clutch is slipping even more now because it's just full power out of nowhere. So now I've got a car that's going into some sort of a limp mode. It's got full power, then it doesn't have full power. I've got a car that I go to adjust the mirrors, and the mirrors aren't working. Actually, the driver's side mirrors weren't working, which is probably from the accident on the left side. Someone probably disconnected something. I've got a car with basically almost no clutch, and I've got a car that has all these weird electronic issues. There's just gremlins everywhere. The AC would turn on and off, and in all these different things. And imagine I drove for almost an hour in this almost nightmare scenario of me buying my dream car, the expectations going from here to here to here, and literally I wanted to cry by the time I arrived to Palm Beach, because I realized that it wasn't going to be a cheap fix. I wasn't going to be able to adjust the clutch. Slowly as I spent time with the car, I realized it was missing some screws and some door moldings and different things like that. And when I went to go see my dad, he was like, "See, told you so." So I ended up keeping the car for a while because it was my dream car. And I started saving to do the clutch and do all these things. So slowly I started to put the money back into the car to get it where it needed to be. Now, I would say over the period of about 4 to 6 months, the engine had to come out for the clutch, so that's what, $8,000. I needed moldings, I needed this, I needed that. So I ended up spending about $15,000 of money that I didn't have. Now, if you start adding up the trucking and you start adding up everything, and the fact that the car did have higher miles, I probably was starting to get into this territory of buying a really nice Diablo SV. And if you think about the headache, I probably should have just started with a really nice Diablo SV. Now, in the end, the car ended up being a very, very nice car. I actually ended up selling it to a collector that drives and enjoys the car every day. He loves the car, and he sort of had a few more gremlins he had to fix along the way. And I think for what I sold it to him, I forget the exact amount, he probably did great considering the value of Diablo SVs today. But at that moment in time, considering the car had a bad CarFax, considering all these things, I actually could have gotten just a perfect car with no issues. So it's funny now because looking back, that was sort of a incredible learning lesson. It didn't happen with a client in a car, luckily. I didn't buy a car that had issues and then I sold it to a client. It happened to me personally. So I learned this incredible lesson, and I think that lesson defined what Curated is today. I don't buy cars with issues. I hate cars with issues. I don't even like cars with a lot of miles because I know that sort of the time and the effort sometimes isn't always worth it. So the next time that someone makes fun of us about buying only perfect concours quality cars, there is a reason, and it's from a personal lesson.